a croeso. Good morning and welcome to the Aging for People with Learning Disabilities and Autism hybrid seminar. It is so great to see you today, that is a Friday, on a bank holiday weekend. So thanks for being with us today. To the attendees joining us in person from Spark event room, and to the attendees joining from their homes or places of work from all around the UK and Spain. A very warm welcome. Bienvenidos a todos a este seminario. I'm Dr. Elisa Vigna, a research fellow at the National Centre for Mental Health at Cardiff University, currently working on the influencing and informing phase of the Engage to Change project. The seminar is the reflection of partnership work and authentic connection that different organizations have been developing over the years in many different venues, here in the UK and elsewhere in Europe. We have a great list of speakers today, so we hope that for today, my hope is for today is that actually we will be able to develop new connections and strengthen the existing ones. I hope the event today will be both informative and inspirational and trigger new ideas in the field of aging for people with learning disabilities and autism. I would like to start with some thank you messages. We are grateful to the Influencing and Informing Engage to Change and the National Lottery Community Fund in partnership with Welsh Government for funding this seminar. The Influencing and Informing Engage to Change is a partnership between Learning Disability Wales and the National Centre for Mental Health. In this partnership work, we are taking forward the policy, research and legacy work of the Engage to Change project. We are grateful to the National Centre for Mental Health and Care for hosting and advertising this seminar. The National Centre for Mental Health brings together world-leading researchers from Cardiff, Swansea and Bangor universities to learn more about the triggers and causes of mental health problems. CARE is the newly established Centre for Adult Social Care Research, bringing together multidisciplinary expertise across the university, working with the public and professional organizations to develop cutting-edge research and on adult social care. I feel that being a researcher is often a multitasking job. For instance, when you're asked to organize a seminar. So I would like to thank Steve Bayer for this challenging opportunity. Thanks, Steve. I would like to thank Ellie Short and Bex Parker from the PsychMed Comms team for their continuous support and insights. Amy Chappell, our Care Research Center Administrator, for supporting with practicalities for the event. Alice Butler, our Care Public Involvement Officer, for stepping in today to support. Andrea Meek, Research Associate at National Centre for Mental Health, for her support coordinating the question today. And finally, you for providing IT support this morning. So before we start, for some housekeeping. So for the attendees in the room, we are not expecting a fire test today. So if you hear the alarm, leave your belonging behind and exit the building from the door that you used to enter the building. So the assembly point is the Spark Pollinator Garden just outside by the car park. We will leave you there. Toilets are around the corner. So if you leave the room from this door or that door, toilets are on the right-hand side. If you need anything during the event, please do not hesitate to ask for support. There are staff members around who can support you with your request. For the attendees joining online, please keep yourself on mute. Do not hesitate to ask for assistance. My colleagues, Andrea Meek and Bex Parker, are on the call and can support you if you experience any technical issue or if you need any assistance during the session. Our speakers will take questions this afternoon during the panel discussion. So if you're attending online, use the chat at any time to ask questions. Andrea is keeping a note of the question from the chat, so we will make sure that some of your questions will be answered as well. So we are allocated until 2:30 for the question slot to allow time to discussion and networking. So without further ado, it is a privilege to introduce our chair for today's event, Zoe Richards, Chief Executive Officer of Learning Disability Wales. Zoe is leading the organization since 2019 and has extensive expertise and experience in learning disability policy and a powerful voice when campaigning for people with learning disabilities. Welcome, Zoe. Over to you.
Good morning, Boroda. So welcome. And thank you for asking me to chair such an important event. And I think the third sector's partnership with research partners has never been more important as we move through very challenging financial times. Having the evidence to back up what people tell us on a daily basis will be vital as we move through definitely the next 2 years, but further on. So Learning Disability Wales is a national umbrella organisation. We have a membership of over 100 organisations and thousands of supporters. We were established 36 years ago. 38 years ago. Here we go. I'm telling lies already this morning. Welcome. Welcome to Zoe's World of Fiction. So 38 years ago, and we were established to support a sector, to support people with a learning disability. When the groundbreaking policy, the All Wales strategy, came out in Wales to move people from hospital settings. So we were established then. Our membership then was very much support providers, but our membership is vast now, and we work with many non-disabled focused organisations to ensure that they're including people with a learning disability and autism in their day-to-day business. So it's great to be here today, and for many years we've exchanged emails with lots of the presenters in the room, trying to get projects off the ground. So it's wonderful to see this partnership happening here today. So I'm not going to keep you much longer. There's been some momentous news in Wales today, as you know. If you've listened to the radio as you're coming in today, Gavin and Stacey will do their final episode at Christmas. For those of you joining not from Wales, Gavin and Stacey is a very famous sitcom on the TV that is funny. So that's dominated the news today, I'm afraid. So if we've got any news about research or any policy going on, we're not going to get it through to the mainstream today. So my job today is just to introduce the speakers, and it's my pleasure to introduce Julian Hallett, our first speaker. Julian has worked for those 40 years in the sector, Julian, over 30 years actually, and you came into post to start working on community provision for people with a learning disability as they come out of those long stay institutions. So psychologist by background. You worked for some years in the South Wales Valleys in community settings, and then moved to the Down Syndrome, well, before that Mencap actually, wasn't it? Mencap up in the Rhondda Valleys, and then the Down Syndrome Association. Down Syndrome Association are partners with Learning Disability Wales in a consortium of organisations dedicated to improving the lives of people with a learning disability. So, Julian.
Great. Well, thank you, Zoe, for the introduction, and really pleased to be here this morning, and very pleased to have had the invitation to come and speak to you from Stephen and Alyssa. I'm going to try and do a sort of combine two areas of work across the Down Syndrome Association. So I predominantly am focused on work that we carry out in relation to health and ageing. So hence probably why I've been asked to come and talk to you. But I'm also going to touch on the Down Syndrome Association's experience of running our own employment project. I know this event is primarily focused on the work of Engage to Change, but we're, you know, as there are across the landscape of learning disability provision, another provider, and we provide employment services. And it will be interesting later today, I'm sure, to hear from the perspective of other European countries in terms of their experiences. This is my attempt at sort of name dropping in a photograph. I'm hoping for the UK audience, at least, people will recognise one particular individual there, who's Lindsay Hoyle, who's the Speaker of the House of Commons. So he tries to keep all the ruly or unruly politicians to order. And we've had, through our WorkFit project, we've had an association with the Palace of Westminster for a little while now, and we've placed 5 people with Down syndrome into paid work around the Palace of Westminster. So people carrying out a range of activities, you know, public facing, hospitality, security, facilities management. And what I particularly like about this picture, he hosted a reception for us a couple of months ago, so it is fairly recent, is just the fact that these are individuals who all happen to have Down syndrome, who just by their very presence of being in that environment are hopefully changing attitudes and thoughts of politicians, policymakers, civil servants. I mean, there are many thousands of people who, you know, pass through that environment every year. So, you know, a really personally important development for those individuals, but I think in terms of society, a very significant step forward. So just to put this into a little bit of a context, I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of changing demographics, really. This is in many ways, it sounds like perhaps a dated study because it's going back about 13 years ago, but it is probably the most, sorry, even longer than that, 20 years ago, but it is one of the most sort of significant studies looking at, it was a sort of meta-analysis of life expectancy for people with Down syndrome. And we would typically now see that as being 60 plus. And if we go back, I mean, certainly 100 years ago, typical life expectancy for people with Down syndrome might have not even reached double figures. Now, that doesn't mean to say even in Victorian times that there weren't people with Down syndrome living into much older age, but they tended to be the exception rather than the general experience. But typically now we're seeing people with Down syndrome enjoying a much longer life expectancy. And then in terms of the numbers of people that we have with Down syndrome, that is the landmark study from about 13 years ago, which thinks, and this was an England and Wales study, there are around about 37,000 people with Down syndrome living in England and Wales. So we tend to quote a figure of about 40,000 for the UK. In England, we've seen the establishment of the Down Syndrome Act, which is now being instigated across integrated care boards in England. And part of their requirement will be to capture much more detailed population statistics for the England population. Unfortunately, or as it stands, the Act doesn't have any relevance in Wales because it's not, it's devolved legislation and was adopted by the England government. And then I wanted to sort of illustrate this clearly by a very current case study. So very nice photograph there of one of our WorkFit candidates with his work buddy. Philip is aged 48. So for somebody with Down syndrome, he's in that sort of middle to older age range. I'm 53 and it always depresses me that I think, am I middle-aged? And I think, well, if I live to 106, I suppose I am. So for somebody with Down syndrome who's relatively recently taken on work. So, sometimes when we think about what people can achieve and, if you haven't made a transition into work by a particular point in your life, then that might not be possible. I think we need to be imaginative in what is possible. He's employed by Newcastle Football Club. and he works in the hospitality suite there. And obviously they, organize functions very often around match day, but, other organizations will come in and use the facilities there to have conferences. It's a third party provided service, so it's another organization, as often happens in these settings, that actually provides their facility management. The work fit model is slightly different from it. So we don't approach this from a job coaching model. We work with employers to initially provide, so we would, job carve, look at the actual role that somebody is going to take on. We'd work very closely with the host employer by providing them with training, and then they would identify a work buddy who would take on that sort of informal job coaching or in work support. And our experience has been that's a very sustainable model, because obviously there would be a funding requirement attached to identifying a job coach, whereas this is putting the responsibility for providing that support actually on the employer, and has been very successful. So just to tell you a little bit about WorkFit, it was initially established in England in 2011, and then we developed a project in Wales from 2014. So we had National Lottery funding, 3-year project. That project, as part of the funding bid, was evaluated externally by Steve and his colleague Ruth Townsley were involved in looking at what was quite a small number of candidates at that time. I think there was about 30 to 40 people by the end of the third year that had been placed in work by the project. But obviously we now have much more significant data. So by this year, across England and Wales, we've got about 1,200 people registered on the project. And our headline statistic is really about the sustainability of employment, and the fact that individuals with Down syndrome that have been placed in work have been sustained in work. So sometimes you hear of projects that will place somebody, they get the in-work support. As soon as that then ends, the placement breaks down. Because we approach this from the employer taking on that responsibility, it works as being very sustainable. Doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is in exactly the same job that they began with. We all move within our careers. They may have moved sideways. They may have left a particular post and taken up another role within the WorkFit project. So that gives you a little bit of a flavour of what we do. And then in terms of sort of our learning, and I just need to see if I can shut down this dialogue box, which that's better. And I realised that I've got that combination of needing reading glasses and distance glasses, and my screen is very small, so I'm going to have to probably look at the big screen. So I think that the key thing for us is, and I'm sure this would be shared by anybody that's been involved in placing individuals in work, is what's really crucial is that initial candidate profiling. And what time and again our WorkFit officers find is when they actually meet the individual on a one-to-one basis, everything they've been told about that person pretty much has to get thrown away. So somebody who everybody might have said, or a careers advisor or even family may say, Emily really loves catering. Oh, loves it. She's got hospitality qualifications, she's got food handling qualifications, loves being in the kitchen. And then you meet Emily and actually she doesn't really like being in the kitchen at all, doesn't like standing up, it's hot. There's all sorts of, doesn't really like getting her hands in the, messy things. And actually what Emily would like to do is work in retail, or what she might like doing in hospitality is the front of house stuff and meeting customers. But because of what she'd been offered up to that point, maybe she was in a college where there was a hospitality or catering qualification, that's where her sort of future was guided. Huge variety of tasks. So I think I could give you a whole list of people that are doing jobs that you would think, oh, I'd never really thought that somebody with a learning disability could, be a graphic designer or work in a solicitor's office or sure we'll see in a moment somebody not actually placed through WorkFit but you know, one of the real trailblazers of employment in Wales who works as a tyre fitter. You know, you can imagine the sort of health and safety checklist that you'd be doing before you placed somebody in that sort of role. But I mean, he's been incredibly successful in that role for many, many years. Very importantly, and I think this speaks to some of the policy developments at the moment about, there's a big push for those of you outside of the UK from central government about getting disabled people into work. We could have a big debate about the sort of political thinking about that. But one of the key messages that I think we need to convey is all of the people that we have within our WorkFit project, and it'd be interesting to hear from the Engage to Change team, are working part-time. And in the main, it's very part-time. So for some people, it might be, you know, 10 hours a week. I can think of somebody who is now working 15, 16 hours, but started off only doing a 2-hour stint and had to build up very gradually. So nobody, even the very able, very physically well people with Down syndrome are working full-time. And so it's that sort of approach to part-time work. And just as the general population, people move on and have different stages of their career. So, you know, if we think about our own working lives, we've probably all done different things for a period and then we've moved on, sometimes within the same sort of arena. But in other cases, we might have had a complete career change, and that can be very, you know, invigorating and sustainable. Just need to move that one on. Okay, so importance of the WorkFit officer, the reviewing. So in terms of aging, because I'm trying to now incorporate this in terms of people's experience of aging, I think that context, so although I said it's a sustainable approach where we put quite a lot of emphasis on the employer taking responsibility, we provide that continual support. So we're always in the background if at any time, if a job changes, if there's new technology brought in. I'll reflect a little bit about the experience of COVID, when particularly lots of the jobs that people were doing in hospitality and catering and customer services changed overnight. You know, we were wearing face masks, we had to keep social distance. You ordered through an app, you didn't go up to the counter. You know, some people who were doing administrative jobs chose to work from home because people who have Down syndrome are clinically extremely vulnerable for that period before the launch and success of the COVID vaccines. People did need to take particular precautions because of their health vulnerabilities. And this idea that, you know, it can be difficult for people with a learning disability to adapt. Actually, our experience was people were very adaptive. The other issue, I think, which was quite interesting in terms of the government advice about shielding. So in the very early stages, I mean, it seems like ancient history now, thankfully, but that period where obviously we were all told to stay at home, people who had Down syndrome were told to take extra precautions and limit the contact that they had with people. If they could return to work, the recommendation really was that they shouldn't until they had the protection of the COVID vaccines. And obviously there was an awful lot of health anxiety amongst the population generally, but I think if you had Down syndrome, you're susceptible to respiratory infections. Sadly, people with Down syndrome were much more susceptible to die from COVID before the protection of the vaccine. Some people made that decision that for their mental health, going back to work was a better option. And I can think of quite a number of families who supported their loved one to make that decision because it was advice to the person. And some employers were a bit hesitant, thinking, well, are we being irresponsible by allowing this person to return to work? But we had to seek clarification, which we obtained to say, no, it wasn't a mandate, it was advice that obviously you can, you know, you make an informed decision. So quite a number of people were absolutely desperate to get back to work as soon as things began to open up again. And employers were very responsible in taking those extra precautions and making it as safe as possible. But I think that was quite an interesting experience, really, in the fairly recent past. So here's a gentleman who I know really well, and I met really before I even entered this workspace. This is Andrew, long before WorkFit, long before Engage to Change, who at that time was a young man. We're all getting older, and he's placed in just a small independent garage about 2 miles from here, and works as a tyre fitter in an environment, as I said, that wouldn't be typically seen as what you would think of placing somebody with a learning disability in that environment. And it was developed by a very visionary individual called Barry Shires, who set up, it was called Gabalva Community Workshop. It's now developed into a much bigger charity called Vision 21. But he basically was a social worker and found there were very limited opportunities for people with a learning disability to engage in meaningful activity. He'd always had an interest in mechanics. He had a little garage with a car that he'd strip down, and he'd invite people to come and they'd tinker and play with the mechanics. And, you know, various people showed an aptitude for that. And then Barry did the knocking on doors, and ultimately, and I know that the particular employer, who was said was just, you know, a local partnership, you know, probably employed about 10 people, husband and wife team. His sons then went into the business. They subsequently became a recipient of the Understanding Learning Disability Award, which is a local recognition of sort of enlightened employers. And he said, when Barry knocked my door, I thought, well, why not? Rather than all the reasons not to offer the job. And he said, often employers will say, the reason I've never done this before is because nobody ever asked me. But actually, that somebody knocking on the door and saying, would you be willing to give somebody this opportunity, proves to be very successful. And then I just wanted to reflect on a, you know, relate this now to the ageing experience. So this is a particular sort of experience that, so the Down Syndrome Association operates a helpline and people can ring up for advice. We took a call, or I took a call quite a number of years ago now, from a social worker in South Wales, who was very concerned or wanted to discuss with us a particular issue that they'd become aware of, where a very independent individual who has Down syndrome lived, had his own tenancy, lived in a flat independently, very minimal support. I think he had about 3 hours a week. Somebody would come and visit and help with sort of, you know, paying bills and things like that. And was employed, if I say to people in Wales, it was a very large building on the outskirts of Swansea. People probably all know where that might be, but let's just say if you ever taxed your car, you might have sent a letter there. You'd go it now to do it online, I would imagine. And he'd been employed there very successfully for a good many years, and was very independent, would get himself to work. And it was actually the security guy. There was a little, because it was a huge complex, you know, you had to go through security to get onto the sort of campus. And this particular gentleman turned up on a Saturday and then on a Sunday. And it happened 2 or 3 weeks in a row. And this particular security guy he didn't work alongside this person because there was nobody there at the weekend. It was a sort of Monday to Friday operation. But he took it upon himself to make some investigations and spoke to somebody in the team at the government department, who then sort of alerted his line manager. And that then kicked off a sort of a bit more of a closer review to how he was coping. And the support worker, who'd never really, because he was a very independent and very capable man, they'd never had any reason to sort of check on how he was managing at home, did a little bit of further sort of investigation and found, in addition, there was a cupboard under the stairs which had about 100 bottles of bleach in it. And then on the way out, sort of going to down the road, there was a spa shop at the end of the road. So he popped into the spa shop, and the staff there said, oh yes, well, you know, we all know this particular guy, but yes, he's coming in, because obviously, you know, people that are developing dementia, short-term memory gets affected. But, you know, he had a trigger thought, probably, I need to buy some bleach, and was going in several times a day. And some of the staff who knew him well would sort of process of distraction, or would, you know, they'd say, well, we just don't run it through the till. But that's not generally how retail workers work. If you go in and you want to buy something and he's got the money, well, they would sell it to him. So it then indicated that actually his finances were a bit array, because he was spending significant amounts of money on this, you know, goods that he didn't actually need to buy. The approach from the employer was really positive. They understood that they wanted to keep him in work for as long as that was possible. And so a combination of reducing his hours. So I think he you know, cut down on the numbers of days that he worked. There was a bit of an issue how he was going to get to work. So somebody said, well, you know, I passed the end of his road. I'm quite happy to go and collect him and bring him in. And then in reality, during the final stages of dementia, the contact kept up, even though it was purely social. So he'd come in maybe twice a week, around about lunchtime. They had a big cafe there that all the staff would congregate in, and he would come and he would socialize with his colleagues because they were very familiar to him, because he'd been there for a very long period of time. So I think a really nice case study of how an employer approached this really sort of sensitively. So, you know, exactly what, and I think, you know, the benefit of a work buddy. And we probably in our own situations, you know, particularly if you've been in a work environment for a long period of time, people cross over that boundary from being an acquaintance. I've got lots of work acquaintances, but then there's quite a small number of people that I've met through work who I could say, no, actually, they've become lifelong friends. You know, I would go to their wedding, or when their father died, I went to their father's funeral, or, you know, we'd socialize outside of work. Not with everybody, you know, and that's perfectly natural, but those connections, I think, that individuals can make through work are really, really life affirming. And then I wanted to contrast this with another experience. As Zoe said in the introduction, I began my career working in adult resettlement. So as in probably all countries, certainly all cities or big, you know, regions of the UK, Wales had long stay learning disability hospitals, and I was working in the one that predominantly focused around the Gwent area of South Wales. And a particular individual and I was a very naive and very newly appointed sort of junior assistant to the assistant to the assistant. So I didn't have much status, but I remember going to this particular review meeting, trying to pick an image to illustrate how absolutely freezing cold this environment was. So we went into this, it was a recycling project, sort of housed in it was like an aircraft hangar with open, you know, great big steel shutters that were open to the elements, and it was cold concrete floors. And interestingly, because of the Orwell strategy and lots of funding, many of the people that were resettled from the hospital there was a very deliberate approach to find 5-day-a-week activities. So this particular gentleman had a program of activities that filled every single day. And he'd been showing quite clearly that he didn't like this particular activity on a Friday. And, you know, the thing that just kept striking, he didn't have Down syndrome, but I knew that he was 68. And I thought, when I get to 68, I don't think I want to be hanging around in a cold, drafty. It was very clear. There was all sorts of approaches about, you know, can we involve the peripatetic support team, and can we set up a behavioural program? And I thought, no, actually, he's making it very clear that he's had enough. And, you know, even for us, people that are getting towards retirement age, you know, statutory retirement age is increasing. But at that stage, it would have been 65. So he was significantly beyond retirement age, even for the general population. So the key sort of questions are, you know, are people with a learning disability allowed to retire? And interestingly, and I think people who have come through perhaps a very traditional day service provision, or certainly have spent any period of time in what we would think of as an institution, would have a very clear idea of certain activities were designated as work. So when H had been in the hospital, he had work to do, and that you know, as did everybody. It was run like a sort of closed economy. So in many ways, it was important for him to have an identity and to feel that he was being useful and productive. But then, do people with a learning disability have an understanding of, in the general circle of life, we reach a point where we are allowed to stop working? And most of us would edge towards that. So, you know, the approach now is probably not to work full time until your retirement age and then suddenly stop, but to have a gradual, you know, easing into that, maybe reducing the numbers of hours that you work, or the numbers of days that you work. The other thing I often reflect on is, you know, if you ever express an interest and you have a learning disability, sometimes people think that is the only thing that you like and that you will always like it. And, you know, if I reflect on my own life, there's all sorts of hobbies and interests that I've had for a period of time, and then, you know, well, I've had enough of that now, move on to something else. But sometimes if you have a learning disability and you show an interest in steam trains, or, you know, you get everything, you get birthday cards with them on, you get taken out to steam trains, you know, and that's fine if the individual continues to like that. But sometimes people, you know, want to try something else. So very quickly, and I'm conscious of my time slot, we're very much a social, we're embedded in the social model of disability. So I wouldn't want to sort of promote an idea where we're thinking about the sort of medical classification of people with a particular learning disability. But if you have Down syndrome, you do have an associated health profile. There are particular things that you are much more likely to experience. So everybody with Down syndrome are individuals, and they'll all have differences within their health needs, but there are things that are more common. So the particular things that we'd say is, obviously we know much more about health than ever before. In the UK, we have as a right, individuals with a learning disability are entitled to an annual health check. And that's partly recognizing that people with a learning disability are more susceptible to experience a health inequality. So in addition to having more comorbidities, they're also, you know, health services are not always as accessible. So very important, really, that people get those annual health checks. And people have conditions that are very treatable, you know, vision, hearing, thyroid, you know, issues that you'll see in the population generally. And if you pick them up, it's just a matter of getting the right sort of interventions. So if we think about particularly people with Down syndrome, and this may impact on people's ability to work or the type of work that they would wish to take on, we know that heart conditions are very common. So around about half of people with Down syndrome have an ongoing issue with their heart. Many of those individuals may have had heart surgery when they were much younger. Hearing and visual impairments are very common, and they tend to increase with age. So you'll have hearing and visual impairments when somebody is quite young or might even be present at birth. And then the likelihood of those developing later in life increase. Incredibly lucky, about 500 yards down the road, we have one of the leading centres for vision and Down syndrome in the world, really. So Dr. Maggie Woodhouses, who is an optometrist here at Cardiff University, runs the Down syndrome vision clinic, and people from all over the UK will come to visit Maggie to get their vision checked. Thyroid disorder is very common, but very treatable, but it does need regular checks. So people with Down syndrome need to have that annual blood check to look at their thyroid function. And then some of the other issues that are more, they're rarer, so they're not going to affect the majority of people with Down syndrome, but leukemia and issues with the bowel and digestive issues are much more common than you'd see in individuals who don't have Down syndrome. So finally, sort of on aging issues, the incidence of dementia is much higher than in the general population, and the age of onset is much younger. So as I said, typical life expectancy now 50, 60, but the likelihood that people with Down syndrome in those older ages are going to be living with dementia. And, you know, dementia is a progressive condition. Many people will live with a diagnosis of dementia for maybe a decade or more. So they could be developing dementia, a little bit like the gentleman I mentioned in work. The first signs of that were picked up really in a work environment. And then the good practice guidance by the British Psychological Society is to carry out a baseline assessment by the time people are the age of 30. So it would be unlikely that people with Down syndrome would develop dementia younger than the age of 30. A dementia assessment won't tell you whether somebody's developing dementia, it'll just give you a snapshot of where they are at that particular point. But if you have a baseline, you can go back and then refer to that. The gold standard would be prospective monitoring from 40 to 50 biannually, and then from 50 plus annually. And I know in this area, Nyren Bevan Health Board have done this, and I've found that very, very beneficial, because they're picking people up in the early stages of dementia rather than people presenting in mid or sometimes even late stage. I won't go through all this in detail, but I'm sure you're aware of the sort of the landscape around demonstrating that there are health inequalities for people with a learning disability. So we have the LEADER programme in England that looks at the premature or avoidable deaths of people with a learning disability. And sadly, people with a learning disability do die between 20 and 27 years younger than the population of people without a learning disability. I want to go on a little bit more quickly because I'm conscious of time. But the key issues that, so when you look at why people with a learning disability die, and it might be from an avoidable or a premature death, it tends to be from sepsis, tends to be pneumonia, and people in late stage dementia are particularly prone to developing aspirational pneumonia. So there's a sort of link there. COVID was a leading cause of death, or people dying with COVID, maybe rather than from COVID. I went to an update last week, which showed that of those people that were clinically extremely vulnerable, in the most recent winter spike, there had been 47 hospital admissions, 1 ITU admissions, but no deaths. So COVID really is, because of the vaccination programme, has proven to be, you know, we sort of, it's still around, it hasn't gone away, and people with Down syndrome are more susceptible to becoming unwell. But thankfully, it isn't killing people in the way that obviously it was in the height of the pandemic. Very interestingly, and I think this has an impact for work situation, if you look at the most recent LEADER report, there was a huge spike of deaths in that very hot period that we had in July 22. And I think that probably needs further thought about the advice that we give to people, particularly if they're working, you know, actually, is it wise for you to be going to work on this particular day because it's, you know, nearly 40 degrees? And then ethnicity, there's that sort of intersectionality of health inequality. If you're from a non-white background, actually, if you're a male and non-white and have a learning disability, then the health inequalities seem to be multiplied. And there's quite a lot of evidence, sadly, to show that. So final 2 slides, I think. Good practice evidence in terms of, so we need to be mindful that we don't give an impression to people that you can prevent dementia or prevent cognitive decline in older age. But there is lots that you can do to keep your brain healthy. And unfortunately, it's all the things that we sort of know. Don't be overweight, don't smoke, don't drink, exercise if you can, and keep your mind active and keep connected with people. I think that connection is a very key thing. Social isolation. I know the consortium of charities that Down Syndrome Association involved with learning disability were very concerned during COVID on the closure of just ordinary activities and how slow those were to open up, and the very significant impact that had on people's mental well-being because they were being isolated. So final slide from me, or a happy slide showing an individual who very well supported in a supported living setting, age 75. We then were inundated with contacts from people saying, well, we know somebody in Devon who's 80, and certainly we do know somebody in Devon who's 80. And the final slide I'll leave you with, going back to Philip, is, you know, team night out with his work colleagues. And you can just see, that doesn't really need a caption, does it? It just tells you a story of somebody who is benefiting from being in work, and demonstrates that that's possible for people of all sorts of different ages. Okay.
Thank you very much, Julian. Really interesting. I think one of the things that pops out, certainly around the WorkFit programme, is the differences in jobs people take up. And that was something that we learned very early on when we were researching to put our application together for the Engage to Change programme. Once upon a time, I had a really fun job as a youth worker, and I used to go out and talk to young people about what they wanted. And when we were writing the bid for the Engage to Change programme, I was at a group down in Pembrokeshire, a group of young people who have a young disabled people's group. And we wanted to know lots of things about what they thought about work. But one of the things that we wanted to know to form part of our application was what type of jobs they saw themselves as doing. And we were running an interactive session, and we just weren't getting any answers about what young people wanted to do for jobs. And you have to think on your feet. And I said, you know, when you were little and your aunties and uncles visited and they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And 9 out of the 10 young people in the room said, nobody's ever asked me that. And that was around the aspirations that we all hold for young disabled people. So that was one of the things that we spent a lot of time looking at. And Elisa, it would be really lovely to go back and ask those questions again of young people who are in transition about what their aspirations are for the world of work. So thank you very much, Julia. And you've speeded us up a little, actually, because we started a little late. So thank you very much for keeping us on time. So to our next speaker, Professor Borja Jordan de Uris. When I was a youth worker, I had some interaction with you, actually. We were looking to set up we were looking to apply for some pots of money. They didn't come off. So it's with that a delight that you're here now and working together on things with Learning Disability Wales. So you're an associated professor at the School of Psychology at the University of Salamanca in Spain, and a member of the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Salamanca. So you've participated in various research projects, studies, and published widely on supported employment, social policies, development and information systems for disability and job deterioration due to ageing and disability. Welcome.
Thank you very much for your kindly presentation. I'm going to start with my chrono to not enlarge my speech more than needed. Okay, so you will listen in 25 minutes. You will listen the alarm. Okay. Well, first of all, apologize because. Okay. Yes, perfect. Apologize because I am Spanish. I try to speak English with 300 words and 15 instructors, so it is my best. I will try to do my best, but be patient with me. Well, I think that I want to give my thanks to Steve and Eliza and the organization, because probably the presentation of Julian has been the perfect start for my second presentation. I think that there is just the framework I needed to continue speaking about what we are doing now in the INICO these last years in this field. Okay. Well, we know that people with disabilities, we used to speak about people with intellectual disabilities, not learning disabilities. This is more familiar for us, this term, intellectual and developmental disabilities, IDD. But we know that people that continue working when they are older, when they get age, can have good and bad consequences for these questions. Positive questions are that they maintain their relations, they maintain their daily structured life, they maintain their earns, money, different things that are good to maintain when you are getting older. But other things like deterioration that appears working when you get old, it's a problem that we have to face. So we saw the feeling in at least in Spain, there was nothing about it, and most of the organizations were facing this problem because they had people getting older, people who had started working 25, 30 years before, and that were arriving to retirement age, and this is a real problem that they hadn't faced before. Okay, so we started with a project that started in 2019, trying to detect needs for people who are getting older in employment, with, in this case, with intellectual and developmental disabilities. What we did is, first of all, a review of the literature about this question to find what do we have in the field, and this almost nothing or a little bit of information about this question. So we made a review, but we identified some questions and some articles interesting, and with that information we started with the first phase of the research, trying to develop an initial bank of items for a tool that we called ProLab. I will explain what it means ProLab. ProLab is prolongation of job, prolongation of labor, ProLab. Okay, this tool initially has 76 items that were part of the process of a Delphi process with 15 employment experts in all the country, trying to define and complete this pool of items. So finally, we had a tool with 76 items that we have been piloting for 3 years in a study, in a longitudinal study from 2020 to 2024. We are finishing this year. Okay. Why? It is what I mean about what means ProLab. ProLab is detection of needs for a successful prolongation of working life. It means that this decision has to be a self-determined decision. I want to continue working because I am comfortable, I am good in my work, and I decide to prolong my working life. Why? Because at least in Spain, we have a framework for retirement, for early retirement for people with disabilities. And this retirement has a pool of conditions of type of disability, age working, years working, and different things that allows people to get into retirement maybe about 52 years old. When they are 52 years old, they can get this early retirement because the normal age of retirement in Spain is about 67. Okay. Well, in these conditions, most of the people trying to get this retirement don't get all the needs to be retired at this age. So most of them has to enlarge the working life to be on the good way and on the good position to decide to get retired. Okay. Well, good. And the project tried to provide answers about how the people with learning or intellectual disabilities get the deterioration, how they advance in this process of deterioration, differences between the general population of with learning disabilities or people without syndrome, because this is part of our objectives. We are talking about that the needs probably of people with Down syndrome are 10 years before than the rest of the group of people with learning disabilities. And we try to describe prevention measures to detect deterioration, prevention measures to go into retirement process, and we try to describe in a good way all the phenomena of deterioration, of job deterioration in the population of people with learning disabilities in Spain. This is the objective of the project. For this project, we have defined a concept that we have called WADA. It means work ability decline through aging and disability, because this is something that we had not identified in the literature. There were different articles talking about how people get deterioration, but not related specifically with employment, and other articles related to employment, but not with this question. So we have to make mixes about different things. We try to define this concept because this is the mix of disability and age. People with disability have their own characteristics because of their disability, but all of us, when we get older, when we go aging, we get different difficulties that in the case of people with disabilities are a second condition, is disability plus aging. So this is the idea, the mix of these two questions, okay? What is ProLab for, and what is not for? It was the most important. What is this for? And this is not, this question is important for organizations in Spain, because we are working in a project and we are producing a tool, but you can use the tool in a good or in a bad way. It depends of the intention that you want to give to this tool. So it is good for what? For identifying support needs. The objective is to identify support needs and to prevent and to provide support. Designing individualized support plans during the process of deterioration and going into retirement. To detect positive elements to build on. If we detect abilities and competencies, we could build over this to construct a good support system. To enable the workers take a self-determined decision about if I want or not to continue working. To plan in transition in a good way, not as a cut, not to jump from employment to retirement. It must be progressive, it must be studied, it must be supported. And at last, how often I have to follow and to assess the characteristics of the deterioration of the person to help him or her in a good way. It may be yearly at the beginning, maybe each 6 months if he need or she need, or maybe in the time you want, whatever you want, if the person is more deteriorated, okay? And what is not designed, what is not for designed the tool? It is not designed to classify workers. It is not designed to say, this is the good one, this is the bad one, and with the bad one I can put it fired from the company or from the job or whatever. It's not designed to justify dismissals or adjustments of the staff of the company. No, it is not for it. It is not designed to restructure. We have a strong structure in Spain, which are the special employment centers. It is centered workshops, but with a strong presence in Spain, because they are a high number of people working there, and it doesn't serve to say who can or not work in the special employment centers. It is not designed to justify decreases in remuneration, in wage. You are working worse than before, so you are going to earn less than before. It's not for it. To take decisions that deteriorate any of the conditions of the person working, it's not for it. And of course, not for any discriminatory purpose linked to aging for the person with intellectual disability working, okay? Well, at the moment, this is one of this piece of work is an article that we have published in a Journal of Vocational Rehabilitation, defining the process of creation of the first tool, ProLab 76. Now I can say that ProLab is not 76. ProLab now is shorter and different, a bit different. I will talk about at the end of the presentation. But it started with 6 domains, 76 items in the beginning of the process, and this is the article about it. In the process, in last 2-3 years, the first in parallel in a mixed methodology of research, we not only work with the longitudinal study trying to validate and improve the tool, nor we had to a parallel process of qualitative research with focus groups, trying in the first year to define a protocol for identifying and prevent deterioration. And in the second year, the groups were devoted to identifying and improve the process of going into return, okay? Well, in both years, we had groups of people with disabilities working, familiars or relatives, and professionals working with these people, okay? Two groups for these 3 categories, okay? With the results of the first year, we made a protocol for prevention and intervention with 2 general needs, essentially to implement preventive actions for workers with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and create a space for training and psychological support. These were the main needs identified by the groups, with specific needs, more concrete. It has to be with adjustment of the work. You have talked about less hours, different tasks, rotation in different positions, different questions that mean allow the person to maintain the work in a easy way, okay? More time of descanso, of rest, more time of rest, or small times of rest during the journey, okay? Maybe different things. Reduce working hours, to regulate public financial resources, because maybe that the worker had a decrease of productivity, but if there is any kind of funding for companies to compensate is the word, to compensate this loss of earnings for the company, it is a way to solve one of the phases of the problem. Okay, well, coordination with social and institutional actors, because in this question there is a lot of people implied. The health services, social services, employment services. Okay, coordination with other services, training professionals. Professionals has had a lack of knowledge about this question because they are facing it for first time. So there is a lack of knowledge in this field, at least in Spain, and they need to be trained. We are working with the national federation, like your organization, but in Spain, working with networks of services devoted to this question, and people who is been trained to know more and how to work in this question. And train families, because families face a different and real new situation, because they are all families, all parents with all boys, but they are all boys, all workers, but really they are not young and strong as 25 years ago, and they are thinking, I'm going to die soon, and what will be the future of my son that is now getting older, and the problems other problems appears now, other problems. Okay, with all these needs, there are 10 proposals related to identifying supports and monitoring, to compile the knowledge of the organizations, because the organizations are developing different strategies to face this phenomena, and all this knowledge is useful to share. A guide of supports, which types of supports can we use with this question? Specific prevention services in each organization related to this question, spaces for participation, change the legislation. We have a framework for retirement. Probably our research will provide information about if this is a good framework or not for retirement, or we need to start earlier or not, or what. Training for professionals, training for families, and programs to advance and prevent retirement of people working in different positions. And finally, our responsibility to continue researching, but to research we need funding, so someone has to provide funding, and we will provide research. So it is a circle. Okay. The second protocol was for retirement. The two big needs were implementing individualized actions related to understanding and acceptance of retirement, creating spaces for active aging after leaving the job, because most of them has been in a different type of life than most other people with disabilities. They are independent, they are working, they live, some of them in independent flats, maybe in groups, maybe alone, maybe in the family, but their life is really different than other people with disabilities that has not the possibility to work. And when they get older, their needs are really different too. They don't need a residence, a residential environment like the rest of the people. They need other type of activities. They don't want to be doing. They want to go out to drink, to spend the Saturday night with people like us like any of us, okay? Well, and this is really not the offer that they receive. They receive the same offer than the rest of the people with intellectual disabilities getting older in different conditions, okay? Well, specific needs, individualized support, of course, for economic management, for autonomy, for independence, for psychological support, family support. I have talking about what they need, how to go from employment to retirement, and how I can help, what aids I can get, what steps I have to take. Well, economic need related to reduce, because if I start reducing my work hours, I reduce my wage. Well, but if I have an economical aid to support it, this problem disappears. Okay. Training for workers and families, training for professionals, collaboration with families, organizations, and companies, and collaboration with disability organizations. It's really that it's real that at least in Spain, the big answer, the big initiative to face all these questions come from the third sector and the organizations which are who really are active promoting steps in this, not the administration. They go after the organizations, okay? And finally, to conduct a personal individualized transition, yes, personal, this is in Spanish, personal individualized retirement transition program, okay? Well. And the proposals are identify needs, to create a program with the stages to go into retirement, to manage the financial capacity of the person, not to dismiss the financial capacity, and to help him or her to maintain and to control the earnings and the economy, trying in collaborative space with different agents of the process, training for natural and responsible supports in the work environment and collaboration with companies. They can facilitate different options if we negotiate, if we work with them, and if we explain the new needs that appears for this person in this new situation, and these adaptations could be made if everyone is concerned with the needs of the person, okay? Providing training, professionals, collaboration with public administration, forums, meetings, specific spaces for retired, what I have talking before. They don't have the same needs that other people with the same age and learning disabilities in different contexts, okay? They come from other reality. Create individualized transition to retirement plans or programs, and maintain lines of research again, if anyone funds, if anyone funds, okay? We are working now in this in another article. It is under review. We have been suggested for changes, and we are working in this change. We hope to get success and to finally publish the article. We hope so. This other is just approved by the journal. This is a real experience applying the tool in an organization. It has been accepted now. And as a resume of all the process in a view, we have the way that, and we need to detect the deterioration to prevent the deterioration. help us and help the person to take a self-determined decision and satisfying decision to extend the working life. The way is to provide individualized support plans during this process. This question has to finish with a personal individualized retirement transition plan. How are we going to do a step by step to go from employment, from job to retirement, decreasing hours, increasing time. One of the problems that we have faced is that, for example, the occupational centers that are designed for people with intellectual disabilities, you cannot be in the employment for hours and for other amount of hours in the occupational center. The law, the administration doesn't allow to do it. So this is a real problem, because this is probably one of the resources that we could use. Well, this is one more of the questions that we are facing. Okay. So individual transition retirement plan, and finally, when all the process has finished, when the person is not longer in employment, you have to continue with active aging program, continue with the transition. After transition, the next step is the rest of the life with an active aging program. Towards the end, we were talking to this before in a meeting that we had in the university, towards the final planification of my life, my last period of life, how I want to finish my life in a good way. This is the process. Okay. Now the tool, what we have now in the tool is the possibility to you can use the online device. This is a free online service. You only have to register with our approbation. This is in Spanish. One of the ideas is trying to validate it in English. So if any of you are interested in any kind of project research in a partnership with us, we are happy to do it. And the tool now provides the actual report compared with the previous ones. So if you have three applications, you will have evolution report of these three applications. When you finish the application, the tool gives you the items in which the deterioration is higher, so you can provide proposals of individualized support for these items, and you can make the individual support plan with the tool, the proposal of this plan with the tool, and in red, green, or orange, you can find the items that professionals who developed the tool thought that could be with options of change if you provide support, green, with less options or change if you provide support, orange, or with not very options of change, because they are characteristics of the process of aging that you cannot change with support. And I don't know if I explained correctly, okay? But so you can decide how to do with any of these steps. At the moment, we have to be careful with the toolkit, because we have not the final rates to classify people in the phenomenal way, but we are working on that. We are finishing this process. So at the moment, you can use the tool to compare with other people, and we compare with the population of your organization, but no more at the moment. But we can say now that the tool we finished with 46 items. 46 items. The 6 dimensions becomes to be 3 dimensions. Your feet, 24 items. Social and behavioral issues, 12 items. And physical health, 10 items. This is the final tool. And this tool is strong. It's strong because the psychometrical characteristics of the tool are very good. The construct validity, the reliability of internal consistency is good, both. So we can say that the tool with these 3 dimensions and with this number of items is a good tool to assess weight, assess deterioration. Okay. Well, in all this process, we have had a very large and collaborative group of professionals from different organizations. We are supported. In the first phase, we were supported by the regional government, the regional organization for intellectual disabilities in Castilla y León, and the National Organization for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And in the second phase, the project is funded by the National Organization of Intellectual Disabilities, Down Syndrome, Spanish Association on Supported Employment, and ONCE Foundation, that is the organization who manage the money in Spain for all the disabilities. Okay, this is the people involved in the first stage, the people involved in the last stage, and more than 16 or than 60 organizations all over the country have participated in the process, in the validation. You can find the links in internet for the project in that links, the project website, the tool website, the interface online, and more information. You can ask for more information using this email address. That is the email of the project, and we will be happy to inform you. We have reports. At least in Spanish, we have articles in English, and we can translate anything if any of you need, and we will be happy to be in contact with any of you if you need. Thank you.
Thank you for what was a really thought-provoking presentation, and I think that it sat directly underneath and give us the foundation for the story that you told us about the gentleman working in Swansea, whose work acted really positively to support him in understanding his dementia diagnosis. And I think that's key, that at the moment we're relying in Wales certainly on responsible employers, and that's absolutely the best way to ensure that people have a good life and a good retirement. But we know that not all communities are as responsive to people with a learning disability, and we need some legislation to underpin that. So that presentation was really good thought for how we create legislation in Wales to be able to do that for our population. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're had a chance to refresh and catch up and make some new connections. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker straight away, so that we can catch up a little. So I'm delighted to welcome Professor Miguel Angel Verdugo, and Professor of the School of Psychology at the University of Salamanca and former Director of the INICO. Miguel has directed and coordinated many research projects and published widely on disability, intellectual disability, quality of life, inclusion, employment skills, social skills, and abuse.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to give thanks to the organizations that are engaged in in this meeting, and particularly to Steve and to Elisa that have been working in, and invited Borja and me to be here with you. Let me see. This. This. No, es aquí. Aquí. Ahí, perfecto.
No.
No. Okay, my speech will be about three concepts that are related to the paradigms that help us to establish guidelines to assess and to support people with disabilities. No? I have been involved in the development of a model of quality of life. And then we speak also in the model that we developed, and now we have theory. We are speaking about supports and quality of life and now citizenship because of the rights. No? I'm going to explain a little what is the way that we think on this, no? Because we have a lot of application and implementation of practices related to the model developed. No? Next. No, pero antes no me... Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, first, few words about the evolution of paradigms. No? We use this analysis of evolution to confront situation of Spanish organizations and practitioners with the model that they are developing over the foundations or basis of the things that they are working. Then what you can find here is a lot of words, but mainly is we have gone from non-institutional approach to a deinstitutionalization or integration. In the institutional approach was until the 60s in UK and in other countries. In Spain, still a little bit more, like at the beginning of the 70s. And then in all the countries in Europe in general, or in America, North America, all started integration in education, supported employment in employment, supported living later. These were the initial of the institutionalization. But then we are in a moment that is community belonging, no? That is, we are thinking about rights, and you compare what are the decisions to make about who receives the services. We have different conceptions that are related to different practices. No? Where, what is planned, who takes decision, what are the main priorities. And well, here we emphasize the last part, the green part, no? Because we are thinking in a city, not in a client, not in a patient. We are thinking on the alternatives, always the aging in your home, inclusive schools, support employment in ordinary employment. So we plan about the future of this, no rehabilitation. This is, we are struggling or fighting about the rehabilitation approach, following a very strong medical model that has been dominant in some parts of the services that we have in Spain and still are present in particularly in some groups. If you look at this framework, in Spain, the complex health needs, mental health problems, they are more still in a kind of institutional approach, not very long institutions, but center workshops, residents separate from the community, and organizations different. So in several points in autism, not all of them, but several of them still are in this kind of alternatives that were already for many years ago. No? Most organizations are doing transition from the institutionalization ideas coming to the communities, interdisciplinary teams. The model was developmental or behavioral understanding of the way you should work. More are transforming from this part to the one that we are defending, that is that part that emphasizes the environmental changes to give better support to people. It's more a contextual approach to the work that we do, not a clinical approach. You know? But these are in the evolution of paradigms. This is the way that we understand the changes that have been done. No? Then also it's not a matter of interdisciplinarity, but it's the person, it's the of support, PCP, personal center planning. No? This is the ideas of no, I can do it.
No, I'm just moving the camera.
I'm good, sorry. Then, well, this is only to see or to check always with people the way that we are working and the way that we speak about people. Although it's not there, mainly it's a kind of change from rehabilitation approach to focusing on life on people, on the improvement of the life and the outcomes related to the personal life.
Yeah, here, so I can see you. No, can you stand here so people attending online can see you actually? Yeah, because they can see you.
Okay,
from
sorry.
online. No, that's fine. Microphone is fine.
It-
But if you can stand here, so then
okay.
people.
I used to move a lot, sorry.
Can you change the presentation?
I have a hyperactivity, but very well controlled, but I need to move sometimes.
The resolution is not good.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
okay. Then I will stay here. Sorry if you. Okay, I'm going to speak now in a second moment about quality of life and supports. I developed with Salok in the States a model of working or understanding the world from a quality of life approach. You have good experiences in Wales because you have here in the Wales Center of Disabilities the work of
David Phelps.
yeah, David Phelps, sorry. David Phelps. And Perry too also was here. They did a very good job in the beginning in the development of quality of life. One of the best first applications of the institutionalizations to small places and a good work in research and in theoretical research. But I have been working mainly with Salok in the States and we are working from 1994 to today still. No? We are publishing and working in the development of how to understand the quality of life. Then now we speak about quality of life and supports and citizenship. This is the way that we are publishing for 2021 to 2025, just now. No? But what does it mean? If you speak about support, you should have like a graphic idea is here. What are supports is probably all of the people that are listening know better, but know a lot about how to understand support. But well, support is the who has the consequences for human functioning. Support is related to the outcomes that we can get in human functioning, independent life, quality of life, development, rehabilitation, even if you want to include in that part, no? But support are the main focus that we must have with working with people with disability. No no individual reductionist therapeutic approaches that has been used in autistic and cerebral palsy, but also in intellectual disability. You can find still in Spain many of these approaches. No? This is the multidimensional model proposed in 2021 by the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. I'm a member of the committee that developed the definition, and we are with this representation of the model from 2002, and then in the previous definitions that were published. It's like the personal environmental variables of the person, like intellectual, adaptive, health, participation, and context. You must know anything about that. You must assess and have information about the person. But the main point is that this information should be translated to the support approach specific and individually that you should develop to get good outcomes. when we speak about outcomes, we speak about quality of life mainly, no? The outcomes are not rehabilitation, but the outcomes are personal well-being. What you think is important for you in many areas that we now can explain. But this is, for example, the definition that is just the one that now has been sent to be published by the Research in Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, is the Q1 Impact Journal. It's acceptable, we must do modifications, you know. But this is the last the last thing that we have about the meaning of individual quality of life is composed of core domains, no? That we are speaking now about the 8 domains that research has told us that are important. And then the domains are impacted by personal or environmental variables, factors, no? Depending different environmental or personal factors impacting the quality of life. IQ, adaptive behavior, mental health problems, but also environmental factors, like if you have good organizations working, good training of the practitioners that are working with them, good resources provided by the administrations. Then, but we also use a system approach, micro, meso, macro system, to know all the things that you must think about to increase or to improve the quality of life. No, well, better than this text, you can look at this. This is a reduction of the idea. No, quality of life are researched. Many research and for different authors has been developed that establish at least a multidimensional approach. We work with 8 domains that have been longly studied for many years ago, and we know that quality of life domains depends on moderators and mediators factors, the personal and environmental factors. No, the ones that we can work better are the environmental factors. The personal, like the level of IQ, is difficult. Sometimes the mental health problems are very difficult to change, but the environmental or contextual factors is where we should focus. No? And we know, because research is helping us to develop enhancement strategies to improve quality of life. The work that is being done in Australia, in UK, or in different parts of the world is new research every year that are telling you ideas about how to solve several problems. No? When you speak in the beginning, Julian, about the down, and you say the profile is important, I think you are right. This, many of the decisions we should have information, data, and research that can help us to decide specific answers to specific groups of people or moments of the people. And then data are very important. No? And in Spain, we struggle a lot to have more data, because data-based decisions is not usual for politics. It's not usual sometimes for organizations too. And then people are working very well and improving much better than years before, but we lack data for take many decisions. No? And well, the quality of life, the reduction of the idea is that, but the main dimensions or domains that were proposed they start from a synthesis of the work of different researchers, like Mike proposed 5 different ones. In Australia, Ivan and Roy Brown 4, 5. But we do a review international in 20 countries. We did a big analysis and survey with people, families, and practitioners. And we confirm that these domains are important in all the world. We work in all continents, not Africa, but in Asia, America, Europe. And we understood that these dimensions are important, and confirm that all countries understand quality of life in using these domains. But how to measure these domains is different, and it should be developed tools that are contextualized
groups of people or in places or in geographical areas that cultural reasons tell you different indicators to evaluate or to assess that dimensions. Then we speak of the emotional, physical, self-determination, interpersonal relationship. Even rights was the only model that spoke about rights. In the beginning, we have hard time to get data that sustain this, no? But after 2006 with United Nations Convention, all data come because it was in the culture of people. When you do research, it has been an important domain too, like the others, no? Although you can understand rights in all the dimensions too. There are different ways of understand that, no? Well, we have many different tools developed. This is for child, but we have more for adults that I will show you now. But the kids' life that is below there, we have the Down version, we have the autistic version too, because sometimes you develop a scale for specific groups of people. This, for example, was primary school, secondary school in general, but then we started to develop a specific for intellectual disability, and then we move different scales to Down, different scales to autism, because the experience of application of the scale told us that we should modify items to understand the quality of life of that groups in that age, no? When you publish on a scale, you must then have later information of the application, of the utility, the modifications you should do to adapt to take good decisions, no? But the main scales we develop or tools are in adult life. Some of them are in 12 languages and in 11 languages, no? Some are validated in English in the States, in French in Canada, and Hungarian, I don't know, 11 languages is like a crazy idea, but has been a reference for many people to adapt, to translate, to validate. I want only to speak about the Scala San Martin is the only psychometric scale published for people with severe and profoundly retardation in the classical terms, no? Is for extended support needs or complex support needs, and this has been translated and adapted in different countries. The San Martin scale and the Nicofiav's scale is for higher levels of disability. Then we have the same model. You remember we're speaking about 8 dimensions, and then the way to transmit or to translate this proposal to the practice was to develop assessment of that domains so people can assess individually or in group the persons and take decisions because of the results they have, no? Then we develop the scales, and the scale has been we develop a kind of qualitative and quantitative mixture of methods to develop good tools that are useful and people can apply. Then now in Spain they are very famous. Many people apply them. They are free of use. We are free of use. Everything that we do is open science. We get the money before, but should be open science, open to all the people. And then many organizations apply it every year, and it's part of the way of the work that they do, no? Well, this has been an important work, and some of the last one are in brain damage. It's another group of intellectual and developmental disability, not developmental sometimes, although specific groups, yes, but in Spain now there are 450,000 people with brain damage, many women, for example, in the 40s, the 50s, in all the countries probably. Years ago, when we speak about intellectual disabilities or cognitive disabilities, nobody involved the brain damage groups, but now they are there. Organizations can share in the same way that you share other groups, although there are differences. But they asked me to develop scales, and we develop self-report and report from others, because these scales that you can see here, many of them are with self-report, what the person thinks about his or her quality of life. And then others or more have only the what is the opinion of the practitioner or the family member, no? Because quality of life is the way that you observe the life of the other person. You observe the international relationships, you observe the development, the physical problems. The observation tells you data, and it's your opinion who can speak about the quality of life of others. But also the person should speak about his, her, or own, his, her, or is her own quality of life. Well, now in the 2021, we start to make a mixture of the model quality of life and support. Support has been present from more than 40 years ago in the work of many organizations, no? With in research with some different issues, sometimes criticism, but it's the main strategy to implement activities in organizations, no? At least in Spain, but I think in many countries, no? There was a moment that Salo and me were discussing about the theory, and we said, well, we cannot speak only about quality of life. We should, because quality of life gives you the outcomes to measure result, to get results of the things that are being doing. Although it can serve to plan too, but we think the activities, mainly the ways, the strategies to intervene are main supports approach that has been developed in many places and countries. Then we make a mixture. We did a research reflection about and to say, well, quality of life speak about what is important for you, and support tells you how to get that is important. Is the way to get that is a different objective. Then what research tells us that the main elements of this approach are choice and personal autonomy of the person, self-determination, inclusive environments, and generic and specialized supports. But also there are contextual issues, conditions that you choose. If you should work in this way, you should check the contextual situation of the community, persons who are there, who can facilitate, who is a barrier, what kind of consortium or training people who is in charge of doing the work has, and then also sharing the culture about the support and the principles of quality of life. But the main point, the main elements are just in the middle, and we focus on quality of life domains. I am speaking only about individual quality of life domains, but there are also research on family quality of life domains. Research with not so much developing or developments of research like in individual quality of life, but we are working now in this area. We are working in brain damage groups about family approaches to help people with brain damage. And we have developed some work also in intellectual disabilities. No? Then quality of life domains is different if you think in the person or in the family. But many families have problems in taking decisions in helping the person with disability, because the effects that has the life of a person with health problems or with mental health problems, for example. No? But I'm speaking about individual, no the family. The family has different domains. There are several common, like emotional well-being, physical well-being, but there are others that are more contextual, the family support, the administration or government support. There are different domains related to the family quality of life. More organizations in Spain has like the mission improving the quality of life of the person and the family. And then rights are the missions are quality of life, person with disabilities, family members, and to advance in exercising rights of people who are the participants or the part of the organizations. Well, choice and personal autonomy, we choose not speaking first of self-determination, but choice and personal autonomy because we think that sometimes self-determination is so sound concept that don't identify in the beginning what is inside it, no? And then is election and personal autonomy is the more of the research on self-determination. Autonomy is the main point. Autonomy that now in Europe we are speaking many about independent life because physical and sensory disabled groups are working with these concepts, no? But well, we think that it's important the opportunities for self-determination and choice that you give. The other day in the meeting that we have, I told that we are taking longitudinal data of the institutionalization of in 8 different regions of Spain in extended support needs groups. And one of the things that now is more relevant is that they improve the quality of life perceived by the person and the self-determination when they could make choice, when they do elections of life and doing something, having for lunch things that I want, doing things that I do outside of the place. These are one of the main results that we are obtaining. But then this is related also to rights and to changes in law, not only changes in law, but that the changes in law are really with exit in the usual world. No? In Spain, we have a good law translating the rights of the United Nations Convention of 2006. But if you examine the way that the governments, we have 17 governments in Spain, the different regions, and if you look at the way that they are working with the laws, the new laws, you can say that many of them say okay to the language, but if you check with indicators what they are doing, then is some are better than others. But the rights are important changes in law, but you should check that also later in how it's impacting the usual work. You know, well, like several of the research tell us that when you do choice and personal autonomy, that increases personal motivation of the people with disabilities. That's a good research done by many different authors, and also better satisfaction and autonomy and decreases of maladaptive behavior. There are a lot of research that tell you that when you increase elections, choice, and autonomy, is related to a better perceived quality of life of the person. No? Then, well, sometimes we speak about dignity or risk, trying to combine parents. You know, Robert Pesk was in 1970s. I don't know if it was from UK or from the States, this man, but he spoke about a good concept that is the dignity of risk. When he speak to families of members with disability, he says it's not important. You should not deny advances in your children or in the adults members of your family. You should give them opportunity to do new things, although there is a little risk in being outside the sheltered places or the safe and secure places. Well, I use this sometimes to speak with people. When I talk to you, people with cerebral palsy, many of them are afraid of to allow the member of the family to be in the community. We are working now with cerebral palsy groups of people, and they tell to you that we want more activities outside the places. We do focus groups by internet in another research that we have developing, and the people with cerebral palsy, when they speak in the way that they can speak, we use POSIT, also in the online training, because they speak so difficult sometimes to understand. We use POSIT, and they put POSITs in the focus. They tell what they want to say, writing it in the internet online with is a yellow POSIT that telling what they want to say. They have some support people helping them sometimes to this, no? But well, dignity or risk is an idea to say, well, things should change, but you should invest in some risk to get good outcomes, no? The other thing that I think is clear for everybody is that natural environments have better consequences that other kind of shelter place, no? Well, the only point I think that something that I should emphasize is that you have here in the last part that anything should be planned, no? In Spain, for example, we have been in inclusive education. We started in Spain. We started later, like 1985. Was a big law that started with a lot of effort and resources and political support to go to inclusive schools. No? After 10 years, this start to go down because this was not for politics. It was not rentable. It was not. They don't take benefit of telling this more time. In the beginning, they were very good people doing new things, but after 10 years, it's not new, and then politics go down. We have been doing in inclusive education. Now it's much better situation than in 1985. I was director and supervisor of special education in a region in Spain in a time, no? And now we are in only 30% of the people still are in special schools, but there are many people still in special schools. There are like 31,000. I think this is too many people, no? But then why still are in shelter schools and not in inclusive schools? Because we don't plan well the changes that you should do. Who should do what, in what moment? What are the indicators to confirm or to review the results? We don't do that. In Spain, we have the data are not the important issue. And when people speak about inclusive education, they say, it's okay, it should be developed. I say, what is your data? How much people are there? What think families about that? What are thinking the people that has been in these ways working? No? Well, inclusive environments is important. I'm going to be quickly because if no, Elisa prosecute me. And generic support is trying to change the way the big organizations have developed, trying to develop all answers inside of the organization. You must use better the generic supports of the community in health, in employment, and anything. Also, we specialize supports is the way that we have been working always, and this is in quality of life, but also in the 2021 definition, because we have been there too, and then we recognize all the approaches that have been useful in knowledge and are useful for working with people with disabilities, although we move much more in a sociocultural and rights approach in the daily life, no? But you should not discard the others' supports to knowledge. Then, well, the four things that the consequences of the quality of life and support us, it can help you support provision, evaluation of results, organizational transformation, and cultural and systems change. This is more important because if you get you combine organizations to being always alive, to transform, to better give opportunities, everything is moving. The consequence is that if you only work in quality of life, changing and assessing and changing individual plans, but you don't change the organization, it will be not sustainable in time. It could be, will not generalize, will not be sustainable in time, and you will have problems. Then you need transform the way the organization work. This is the 2012 book that we developed after 4 years of work. And then now we think that you should start continuously doing a cultural and systems change. Well, I will finish now. This is how in the last time, because of the influence of the rise, we are speaking about the more important the role that people should play in organizations and in the work that we do, in the programs that we apply. That's important, and we should control continuously what are they doing, that the co-production, the co-working, anything about research even should be with this approach. This approach is coming from the after the convention and the rights to justice approach. I think there are many articles in the last years from Salog, Lucason. We have now several articles together with them and independently. Well, it's like including the paradigm. This is a summary of the things of the quality layer support approach and the citizens in paradigm. Holistic approach, contextual model of human functioning, disability rights principle like the roadmap, and personal-centered implementation strategies. Here we are making a mixture of everything, trying to develop our model. Well, this is the micro, meso, macro system, and then anything that you can do, you can say what is happening in the practical application of people on the practitioners, but what is happening in the organization. Organization should be alive, should be focusing on objectives, should confirm that it's advancing in new opportunities, more activation of the family members, more activation of the role of the person, and then the administration. We call vertical and horizontal alignment, but well, I'm going to finish now, Elisa, don't worry. Well, at the end, is some of the ideas that are common ideas, but I think that are the ones that we emphasize. And I finish now with this idea. I'm not sure that it's Einstein, because this was a phrase that I took from internet, and you never know if it's real or not. I have books from Einstein. I never found. I was looking. I never found that. Probably something invented that and say Einstein, but it's a nice idea to tell organization. Life is very dangerous, not because of people who do evil, but because of people who sit back and watch it happen. What is happening. This is good. We still are working well. All the life has been like this. The ordinary work is, families are okay with us. This can tell you many people that is working in shelter place, doing rehabilitation strategies only, that doesn't recognize rights of people, and well, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really interesting presentation, and you referred lots during your presentation to data, and not just data within the research that you're doing now, but more generalized data that's available for people with a learning disability to be able for us to understand and plan services. And in Wales, our data, our regular data is pretty bad, it's fair to say. What we know is that there are estimates to be around 17,000 to 18,000 people with a learning disability who are known to services. That's increased post-COVID just because the access to vaccines required you doing some self-identification at GPs. So that's increased slightly. But the realities are that there's around 75 to 80,000 people with a learning disability living in Wales. We have really awful data. We don't have any data on employment. We don't have our unique data to share in Wales. And so we've got a lot of work to do in Wales to understand the more general data that's available without research data as well, to be able to plan effectively for people's lives. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had a chance to refresh during lunchtime. We've got 2 sessions this afternoon, a presentation and then your chance to ask questions to the panel. So the next introductions, it's a double act here, waiting to come up. Judith Kerem is Development Director at the Care Trades Charitable Trust, a charity in London that provides training into work and support placements and work placements for autistic adults. Judith develops training packages and carries out training and consultancy throughout both the UK and with a wide range of employers, including the NHS, government departments, multinational companies, local government and other charitable organisations. And topics of those training opportunities include neuro-inclusive workplaces, autism awareness, EDI and autism, neurodiversity awareness in the workplace. Judith has presented at several conferences, both in the UK and throughout Europe, and has delivered bespoke training to international delegates, as well as co-running an annual autism and employment conference in partnership with London South Bank University and Employment Autism. Joining Judith will be Dr. Steve Bayer, who is an expert at graduated retirement, as we're on the topic today. Steve is honorary lead of the Learning Disability Employment at the National Centre for Mental Health and at the School of Medicine in Cardiff University. He's published widely on supported employment and transition from school for people with learning disabilities. He's carried out national studies for UK government departments on job coaching, on job coach model of supported employment, cost-benefit analysis programs, and has worked on a number of European projects also. He recently completed an evaluation of the Engage to Change project, funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, sponsored to deliver paid placement and paid job opportunities for young people with learning disabilities and autism in Wales, and has also been a wonderful mentor to myself in my 5 years as CEO at Learning Disability Wales. So over to you both.
Thanks very much. Just a few observations, first of all. Building on the previous presentation on quality of life, we've certainly used quality of life to compare outcomes of different forms of employment or non-employment for people. And it's a really good system to compare sheltered and open work and also supported employment with no employment as well. And we've seen, really good outcomes for people from that measurement system. So it is actually quite a practical way of looking at policies. And no doubt it will be helpful to see how people retire and whether they retire well and whether different pathways to retirement, more organised or not, will get better outcomes for people. Certainly Borja has, I think, made the case for longer term monitoring of people as they get older with learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, to help ensure that they can stay in work. One of the points we're going to make today is that that's, I think, true for a much wider group of people who come under the general heading of developmental disabilities. And we'll make the case for that. The other thing is that it's quite interesting. We wanted, our observation of this phenomena of people, falling out of work earlier than the normal population. We've seen it happen. And we tried to get some research money. Coincidentally, at the time, the government in the UK was very worried about the lack of, more people going into long-term sickness, not enough people in the workforce. And they put out a grant. How can we help people stay in work post-retirement or post-ordinary retirement age? So we put in a proposal to look at people, but we made the case that if you're looking at people with disabilities and developmental disabilities generally, you need to start earlier. You need to look at 50s. And we got turned down. We got turned down because they were only interested in people who are over 65. Now, that's why this is important, that people are being left out of policies because nobody's in policy areas are really recognising that people are getting to this crunch point earlier than others. And maybe they need better help, as the previous speakers have mentioned. Help. That's what happens to retired people. They can't work technically.
Everyone.
Oh, is it there?
Yeah. Sure.
Doesn't
Doesn't work.
just click on it. That works? Okay, we're doing that. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. So, why is this all important? You know, we've had some hints at that of from the previous presentation, but we must recognise that employment is a social and life anchor for so many of us, I think. And its loss can have big consequences for quality of life, particularly people who don't necessarily have the resources to be able to plan their way through that. So we can lose friendships, we can lose a sense of self-worth, we can lose quality of life, we can certainly lose income, and we can certainly lose a sense of purpose of what gets us out of bed in the morning. So it's very important that we help people to make those personal decisions about retirement. First of all, not at a point when it can be salvaged, but also to make sure that some of those elements that they've had and enjoyed in employment can be carried over into a very positive retirement. As we've said, you know, some of the impacts of the loss of that can be more important to people who have learning disabilities or even neurodiversity, who find it difficult to plan, to marshal resources, to get support from other agencies to manage that transition. It's also important to say that it should not be staying in employment at all costs. Quite often we advocate that because we have a very negative view of retirement. For many, it is a transition into poverty and loneliness and social isolation. And it doesn't need to be like that, but it takes effort and planning, I think, to get to a stage where that's not true. Thinking about who might be involved in this kind of early age and disability related reduction in work capacity. Certainly, you know, we've heard from Julian, you know, the idea that 15 to 40, maybe, I think your statistics were 9 to 36% people with Down syndrome have this onset of Alzheimer's, but it's not only that group that there's a preferential and an early Alzheimer's as we can see, and we're looking at, you know, 15 to 20 years earlier for this particular group. There are other, I think Julian, you know, identified some things that come with it, but there are also health implications other than cardiovascular system issues that can affect the ability of people with Down syndrome who don't have early dementia but may get other things. So certainly osteoporosis is more common in people, and, you know, requiring more intervention around vitamin D and other vitamins as people age. People with Prader-Willi syndrome can have higher rates of cardiovascular disease and be more prone to type 2 diabetes. People who have cerebral palsy can have higher rates of seizure and epilepsy. And with that becomes the use of some drugs to control that over long periods of time, which can themselves have consequences like osteoporosis, brittle bones, lots more fractures for people. And also the idea of tardive dyskinesia, where people start to get involuntary tics, involuntary movements that make it difficult to do fine work and may compromise over time, as you know, long periods of drug use in that sense can leave people not able to do a job that they once did. It's also interesting that if you look at the broad group of people with developmental disabilities, which includes people like ADHD, ASD, ASC, learning disabilities and some other conditions, depression is more prevalent among that group of people, particularly in older age, and is often undiagnosed because some of the communication difficulties and other overriding problems that people have, and it's spotted. It means it's not spotted.
which can also mean that depression can then seep into people in older age for that group and then start to undermine their work capacity. There are also some trends here with people who have autism or are more generally neurodiverse. And you can see work decline through aging and disability, and that can lead to some of the elements of the list at the top there. With age, increasing anxiety, increasing mood swings, increasing irritability, although that includes me these days as I get over 65, being more neurotic. And I think more controversially, but certainly there's data coming through now that even people with autism can face higher levels of dementia in older age than the general population. And although there's more work needs to be done on that, there's certainly one large study that shows that people are 2.6 times more likely to get dementia in old age if they've got the diagnosis of autism. I can't give you a causal route to it, but clearly that's not something that people generally think about when they're thinking about the older transitions of people with autism. Now, by need, it doesn't affect everybody, obviously, but it's certainly a trend there. More generally, for people with autistic spectrum conditions, there are also some associated or higher risk of some health conditions or more negative health conditions in older age. Again, the causal mechanisms are not always clear, although we suggest some here. More seizures. Parkinsonism is higher prevalence among people with a broad diagnosis of ASC or ASD. Also, some people with more significant autism take special diets that are gluten-free. And with those particular diets, you can find some problems around osteoporosis and bone density that then lead on to fractures and general pains, aches, pains and everything more prevalent in older age than the general population. And those obviously can also be related to use of anti-epileptic drugs. Again, for people with ASC, there's a correlation with greater depression and anxiety in older age. Interestingly, there's an emerging trend in general mental health conditions and dementia. Again, the mechanism isn't well understood, but certainly there are significant differences in the prevalence of dementia when you look at large-scale studies, and they've done studies of people, over 1 million people in New Zealand, that show higher rates of dementia for people who've had long-term mental health problems than the general population. Now, mental health problems, depending on what it is, can have their own aging trajectory, but certainly there's an association possibly with more early onset dementia as well. There are also some positive trends. As you know, autistic spectrum conditions are multifaceted, so there are different elements to it. And certainly there's some evidence that over time, with age, that some of the elements that define ASC, they reduce. So that deficits in planning and cognitive flexibility in aging can actually get better with age, whereas some of the other elements of it can decline or stay the same. And some have actually said that for some people with ASC, it actually enables people to be more cognitively able than age peers, if you like, in some circumstances and some jobs. Also, the rates of tobacco and alcohol use are generally lower with people with learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, including autism, which also has kind of a public health benefit to people, that they're not as prone to some of the smoking-related problems that you see. But I think the point is that overall, negative consequences of health and diagnosis can lead to a mismatch between the person, the successful delivery of their job, and can lead to this kind of idea of a forced or abrupt retirement for reasons of health and job instability, which clearly we want to avoid through positive planning. So some of this has been mentioned, but there's a more extensive list of the kind of things that we may see where people are being affected by age-related decline. I need a microscope to see it on here, so I am twisting around. But as somebody who's an employer or somebody in employment support, you may be looking out for decreases in pace and quality of work. You know, we know from HR experience that increased sick leave is an indicator of problems. Increases in clumsiness and fatigue, more relationship difficulties between people at work, difficulty in learning new tasks as the job changes over time. I won't read them all out, but you can see it's quite a long list, and you can add to that also what you might call the normal processes of sight loss or sight change and hearing loss and hearing change, which might be recognised in people without any disability, but certainly is often problematic to identify in people with learning disabilities who don't kind of identify it themselves and aren't self-identified. So these can actually mask even some issues about relationships, behaviour, and challenging behaviour and relationship decline can be actually related to hearing loss, not anything related to dementia or other cognitive aspects of what people do. So, you know, it's one of the contributions I think that Borja told us about here with the ProLab 76 or 46 as it is now. Even if you don't adopt it as a major system, it starts to give you a tool to start thinking about in a comprehensive way whether people are starting to exhibit some work decline. And for all the positive reasons that you mentioned rather than negative, it gives an opportunity to start planning around how we can keep people in work, if they wish to, longer through all the changes and adaptations that Judith is going to talk about in a minute. There are other considerations as well. It's not only health and cognition that changes. There can be other things that are affecting people that have to be taken into account as well. These can be changes in the workplace, either in staff or in production, and the workload, which may affect people over and above any health issues. Late diagnosis of a neurodivergent condition. I mean, it's kind of chicken and egg, but there are a lot of people who are diagnosed late, I think. And sometimes that people are identified because there are problems and issues at work, and they then have to be kind of catered for if it's not going to lead to employment breakdown. The family, people becoming carers rather than cared for or supported by their own family, can lead to overwhelming problems that then bleed into the workplace and cause problems at work. A lack of perception of when the time has come to retire for people who may not see the signs and may not recognise it, or people who may be frightened of the consequences of that in terms of, oh, now I have to plan not being in work anymore. And also family perceptions. It may well be that families have a very different idea from either the person or support organisations about when retirement is appropriate. And it may either be too late because that person's sorted, they're out of the home for 5 days a week. That's really helpful to the whole family. Or it could be that they think people ought to retire earlier than actually is feasible. So all of these things, I think, are considerations in looking to identify problems before they become work breakdown problems. Other things to consider in assessment is whether these are intermittent problems or whether they're increasing in frequency. Is the situation stable, or if not positive but stable, or whether it's deteriorating? Might there have been a triggering event that caused the problem that may be overcome? What capacity does the employer have to adapt and assist? It may be that somebody can have problems in the same problem in two different employers, where one is insoluble and another one actually can be addressed because of the nature of the employer and the employer's resources. And also whether transition to retirement can improve a person's quality of life or diminishing it. So it may come a time when actually the amount of work you have to do to sustain somebody in work actually is too much, whereas they would be better off in a well-planned retirement. So that's another thing to think about. So I'll stop there and hand you over to Judith.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, my turn now. Just to start off by saying that people are in employment the majority of their week. If people are working 5 days a week, that is a lot of the working week, a lot of the week. And so therefore an employer might pick up on things that families, partners, carers may not see. So it's really important that employers have that support structure and the skills to be able to pick up on things and notice when things are slightly changing. This quote is from somebody that we work with, and I think it's really important. Work for a lot of people that we work with is the single most thing that is important to them, that gives them a sense of value, gives them an income, gives them a sense of worth. They are contributing with their expertise into the workplace and the economy. And that can't be taken lightly. We really need to respect that. We really need to make sure that we are supporting somebody. At the same time, we also need to make sure that those people are also being supported when things aren't going great, when things aren't going right, when we need to support them to exit or to transition into another part of their life. If you are a job coach or if you're a manager, there are certain things that you can notice that you will pick up on. So making mistakes. I work with people who never make mistakes. Their accuracy is like 99.9%. But when you notice that they are starting to make mistakes, or a manager says, you know, X is not producing the work to the standards of usual, then you've got to kind of just think, what is going on? You've got to be a little bit of a detective. You've also got to think outside the box and kind of take your manager's hat off and become a human and be a person and be thinking about that individual. So making mistakes is a really interesting one to look at. Forgetfulness, forgetting things, changing in routine. Does someone look different? Is someone not taking as much care about themselves? Is someone coming in late? You know, if they've always come in at 9 o'clock every morning and suddenly it's 9:10, 9:15, or the reverse, it's 8:30. What is going on? You know, what can we do to kind of think about supporting somebody? What is there? What are the triggers? Also looking at stress. Is someone more easily stressed? Is something that they've always done stressing them out and just making them more anxious? Is someone taking more sick leave? Is someone complaining about any health conditions or feeling, you know, mentioning things, mentioning fatigue? And also, are they talking about financial issues? Is suddenly someone really worried about money? You know, is someone just concerned that they're not bringing in enough money, they want more money, and the stress is about that. So it's also thinking about, you know, mortgages is a big thing at the moment for everybody. And with mortgage changes and interest rates, if you've got somebody who's kind of had the same interest rate, or someone else has been looking after their finances, and suddenly interest rates change and their budgeting changes, that can have a huge impact on work, on them getting into work, on how they buy lunch. You know, all of those things have a huge impact. And as a job coach, we need to look out for that, but managers do as well. So a lot of the work that we do and that employers do really has an impact from the Equality Act. So the Equality Act is what underpins everything that we do to support somebody. We need to make sure that they are being protected from a legal perspective. They are not being at a disadvantage, and that they are not being kind of pushed out of the workplace illegally. So my position is that I always need to make sure that managers, employers, parents, carers, and the individuals are very aware of their legal rights within employment. Age is a protected characteristic, as is disability. So going back to talking about intersectionality, we need to make sure that all the areas and all the aspects of someone's life are actually respected and considered in any decisions that are made. So you cannot be chosen for redundancy just because of disability. There is a process for redundancy. So just going on to talk about redundancy really, because that is something that comes up as well. Retirement is one thing, but actually redundancy may come before retirement's even considered. So we need to make sure that individuals are fully aware of their rights, that they cannot be chosen for redundancy because of their disability, and the adjustments that need to be put in place for redundancy processes. So the reasonable adjustments that would come under the Equality Act are considered from the minute someone starts the job process going into work, right until they're exiting, whether it's retirement or whether it's redundancy or whether it's medical retirement. Reasonable adjustments are there the entire time and underpin all the decisions that should be made for an individual. It's also really important to bear in mind that the particular moments of stress, such as the threat of redundancy, that might be when someone actually shares or discloses a disability or a condition, that they may not have done so before that to an employer. So we've got the late diagnosis. We've also got the opportunity that somebody may not have actually told their employer before they get to that stage. So that's why it's really important that the Equality Act will kick in at any point. So if somebody then shares that information at the point of redundancy negotiations, the Equality Act is there, everything needs to be respected. Long-term sickness is one of the main reasons given by disabled people for being economically inactive. And if you compare it to the economically non-disabled people, this is within England, you can see the huge difference. You've got 53% compared to 17.8, and you've got 7.8 compared to 1.6. That's a huge difference. And a lot of that is because people are not given the right information and employers don't have the right information to actually support people. And somebody being on long-term sickness, and the easiest thing is for them not to come back, for them to be retired out of work. I currently work with somebody who is on long-term sick, who is probably coming up for retirement age as well, but has no intention of retiring. And we are looking at, it was a staged return to go back into the workplace. When you think about retirement, you almost have to think about it as a staged support out of employment. So we will put a staged return in for someone medically. We also need to support that going out of work or when work changes. So if somebody goes from full-time to part-time, we need to phase that in as well. We need to give people the support to transition in the time that suits them. You're then going to reduce stress and anxiety. You're also going to give people the opportunity, if it's a financial issue, to kind of understand their finances and plan for the future in a timely manner. So it's not just they have one salary 1 month and suddenly it goes down and they're really struggling, because that really affects somebody's mental health and ability to really kind of, think forward and plan for things. It's really important to get support and help from everybody around who can provide that support. So I've already touched on redundancy and medical retirement. It's really important that these are not considered through disability on its own. There are lots of considerations that people need to have and employers need to have, so the individual and the employer, in order to go through these. If somebody wants to go for redundancy, that's great. We can go through that process and we can support them. But if they don't, and they're not willing to do, voluntary redundancy, then we need to support that person through all the strains and all the processes that go with the redundancy processes within companies. So companies need to be very aware of processes. So this is where you have to think about policies and procedures within the workplace. Are they set up to support people exiting out of employment or potentially going through redundancy? Are your policies neurodivergent, disability friendly? Are they considered? There is a lot of support for people going into work. You know, Care Trade support lots of people each year to move into the workplace. We support recruitment, we support onboarding, and we support people going through their work. We don't always consider the other side. So we're just starting to do that. So I started working in supported employment and supporting people in employment 24 years ago. I'm now working with those people who I supported 24 years ago, who are now looking at the other side of work. You know, they are looking at retirement. And it's not something I thought about with them 24 years ago. And now, having worked with them, now we're looking at that other stage. So it's really important that we think about it, as we've all said, as early as possible. And a lot of that will come from policies that need to be put in place with the employer. Medical retirement is really important, that autism and other neurodivergent conditions are not grounds on its own for medical retirement. And a lot of employers may sometimes try that. One of the things when I'm working with mostly large employers is really working hard with HR and occupational health to make sure that the information they give is the right information, and that there are always options. There's always a plan A and a plan B. It's not just this is the only thing that's going to happen, because no one in the general population would just be told that. So why should anybody else? So looking at the actual support considerations, I always think it's important as a job coach, as someone supporting employers, to work with the employer, to work with everybody that is around that employer. So you've got occupational health, you've got HR, and they also need upskilling. So it's making sure that everyone has the same information, as reading from the same page. One of those things that we use quite a lot are workplace passports. So they're relatively new. They're a very easy thing to put in place. It's a live document that is owned by the individual. And we actually encourage all workplaces to encourage all employees to fill one in. But what that document does is it shows what a person needs, what a person doesn't need, what a person likes, doesn't like, what support they would need, and what they want. And if there are any other considerations that need to be put in place. And that workplace passport should go with someone the whole way through their career, so that when it gets to a transition point, nothing is a surprise. There is nothing there that an employer doesn't already or shouldn't already know. And as a manager, you know, you need to also be using common sense and be, you know, a caring, considered manager in order to be able to do this and facilitate that. So it's going beyond sometimes what your job is on paper and what your job should be as a person, as a human, as a colleague, as a friend. Looking at people's living situations. So we talk a lot about hybrid working now. What if someone has to move house because of the cost of living? What if someone moves into supported living? What if they are living with parents and parents unfortunately pass away or want to downsize? So looking at kind of the distance to work now, could we make adjustments? Can somebody work from home full time or come in less? Could we look at how to support somebody through that, because location-wise things have changed? We also want to look at social support. So what else is out there? Do we need to look at social services? Do we need to get parents, carers, partners, children, you know, friends involved? And sometimes employers feel that they're overstepping the line, but I think actually sometimes there's a very fine line between employment and kind of life outside of work. And sometimes we need to merge the two to be able to give the person the right support that is needed at any stage, really. And preparing for change. So this was, we had quite a lot of discussion about lunchtime about preparing for change and getting advice and making sure that people are getting the right advice and as much advice as possible independently, but that everyone has kind of the bigger picture, so they know what the outcomes are or what the plans are, and they can advise from different perspectives. So we have legal advice, financial advice, social advice, housing advice, even potentially relationship advice. And also looking at the fact that as people age, unfortunately, people pass away. So the social network that somebody may have had 20 years ago, they don't have that anymore, and they don't have that person to go to. They don't have that friend or that critical friend or that confidant that they would have had. You know, do they need someone else to provide that support? Are there befriending services? Is there a social network at work? So we work at Guy's and St Thomas's in London, and they have a really brilliant employer network, different groups to support different groups within the hospital of employees. And so they're there, you know, it's a confidential, it's kind of a trust. They can ask those questions, they can get advice, people can recommend who to go to. So it's really important that organizations, when they're looking at what support they offer employees, they are also looking at what support they can offer employees when things, you know, when they're exiting, when things are changing, when there are transitions. So, you know, potentially setting up a group, you know, in a large organization, it's probably easier, of those who are thinking of retiring or changing their job roles or downsizing or going part-time, you know, having other people, other support to go, yeah, I did that and it was fine and this is what I did. So getting that right advice. And health concerns. So obviously with aging comes health concerns. And as I mentioned before, I work with someone who was off on long-term sick, and coming back, you know, she's realized that she can't do things in the same way she did before. Her concentration needs time to build up again. So the phased return did help. But now we're also thinking, actually, is the job now the right job for her? So she's not thinking of retiring. What she's thinking of doing is changing her role. She wants to stay in work. It's incredibly important to her for many reasons, but the job now isn't right for her anymore. So what can we do to make sure she stays in work, but has a slightly different role and can transition into that? And eventually she will transition out, and she is considering that as well, but not for a long time, because she really feels she's still got a lot to give. And we cannot, you know, underestimate the power of that within the workplace. And I have mentioned about elderly parents and bereavement. So do social services need to get involved? So we feel that we're making many more phone calls to social services now to make sure that people are getting that support from that side as well. Is there something they, you know, the local authority can provide in support for somebody? And also mental health support. We've seen a huge increase in people wanting support around their mental well-being. And it's really important that that is considered every step of the way. So top tips for retirement. I like to think of retirement as kind of not retirement. It's just another stage in someone's life. It's almost like going from one job to another. I know lots of people who are busier retired than they were when they were actually working, or it's the same. So we need to really make sure that we are not letting people go into decline because they're just sitting at home not doing anything because everything's stopped. That network has stopped. So we need to make sure that transition happens. We need to make sure that we are looking at what somebody will want to do, helping set that up, kind of be that support every step of the way. We need to think about travel and location. We need to help around financials, socializing and support. What groups are out there? What is there to do? What skills that they have done from their working life, you know, what skills can they bring to do something else somewhere else? So volunteering, you know, using their brains, keep on going, keeping active, because a lot of that is also, you know, from research that keeping active helps from health. It helps on with physical health as well as mental health. And making it into a positive, you know, it can be a positive. It can make a huge difference to someone's life when they're ready to move on. And keeping learning. So there's lots of courses out there for people to do. There's lots of opportunities, and it's just making sure we're matching those up to the right person, to the right activity. And we talked earlier about, you know, special interests. Well, this could be the time where the person with that special interest, whether it's trains or, you know, anything else, or transport, or I'm going on about transport because I know a lot of people love it. That's their opportunity to really, really focus on it. You know, they have the time to go and chase trains, or they have the time to go and travel. They have the time to do all those things that were just a hobby. That can now be a bigger part of their lives and bring a lot of, you know, happiness and joy and mental well-being to that individual. So I'm just handing back to the final part.
1 minute. Yeah. one of the questions is, can you plan an effective retirement? Now, in Australia, over the last few years, the employment funding, or the government employment funding agency, has funded planned transition to retirement using a supported employment model. So rather than find an individual placement, they found people individual social and recreational activities. They've helped train people to make use of that in the same way as you would use a job coach. And they've transitioned that and provided ongoing support for that person. And as a measure, they looked at people's social engagement. And they found that basically people's social engagement in work didn't necessarily change very much when they moved into this planned transition to retirement. When they compared them to people who didn't have that planning, they found that the people sustained activity and networks, whereas the other people didn't. They became more socially isolated. And it basically says that the supported employment model that's used to get individuals into work is also a good working model for getting people at the other end of life into a planned and active retirement. So there's at least some evidence there that this stuff works if we can understand it, fund it, use it. Thanks for that. There's some references there if you want to look at the epidemiology or where any of these figures come from. That's our acknowledgement. If you want to look at the Australian stuff, there's a reference there to Brotherton, who's done a lot of this research work on transition to retirement in Australia. And thanks for some of the pictures that have been used or not used. And that's me, and that is Judith. Thank you very much.
We're going to go straight into the panel questions now then. So if all of our presenters could take their seats. And I'm going to hand over to you to chair.
Yes, thank you, Zoe. I'm just moving the camera slightly. Let's see if it works. I'm getting you all in the picture. Okay, so we start with some questions from the online attendees. So we got a question for the panel from Victoria Waller, joining from North Wales. What is your view about people with learning disabilities and autism aging on benefits? So how can we make sure there is continuity of the vision and quality of life?
I think it's a really important topic. And I just, from working with a group of people at the moment, actually getting the right benefits, getting the benefits that work for them, and actually being accepted onto the benefits is really tricky. So we took that here, universal credit processes are really difficult. So it's not an easy option by any means to think about moving on into benefits. It's also really important that people are aware of what benefits they're entitled to. And you can be working and you can be on benefits as well. And I don't think that actually the two should be separated. I think they do work together because people need those benefits for depending on the work and the income that they have. We also work with, this is kind of slightly different, but we work with a lot of young people who are on benefits who we then want to kind of move into work. And it can be very tricky to make those transitions. And sometimes it's easier not to than it is to, even if all the will in the world to want to work is there. There's also the pressure to carry on, we talked about that, carry on working beyond when you really should be working, because that transition is so tricky and stressful that people just do not want to go down that route.
In the case of Spain, people can maintain benefits while they are working. The system is not good designed because they have an index. It's called IPRN, which is IPREN, It is an index calculated with all the rents of the person, and it is under the minimum wage, the minimum social wage, because it is cheaper. It is cheaper than the social minimum wage, and they can serve both options, but this benefit usually disappear when people start working and earns a little bit more than social minimum wage. So this is one problem, but the other is in the case of people who get older working, if they have to dismiss the working time and wages dismissed, this is not going to increase really the benefits. So there is a gap between the economical situation of the person before with all the wage and with all the journey working. You see, when they start reducing these questions, the problem appears, and the third question is that the regulation of the, as I told in the presentation, the regulation of the retirement, the pre-retirement age for people with disability probably is not well structured, because they have problems to address all the needs that they have to show to get this retirement, this early retirement. So there are different problems that makes at the end that the benefits for retirement pension or any other could be enough to maintain the same level of economical terms that they had before working or after retirement.
Thanks so far. We were talking with Zoe before that we don't have a different retirement age for people with disabilities in the UK. So that's something that we don't. No. So this is definitely something that
It's working.
is it? Oh. Is it working now?
Now that is working.
I'm so sorry. That's, okay, so should we take the next question from the floor? Any question? No? So I got one, if I may. So I thought that actually really thought-provoking about the contribution from Miguel about quality of life, and one of the way of achieving, possibly for me the most important way, is through change in the environment. Yeah. So, and this also connects to what Julia was saying about training. So all the training that you do with the employers. Also training in general, what we do with health professional. So my question is, where do we go from here? So how we can further influence the environment in order to make positive change for people with learning disabilities and autism aging?
Yeah, I mean, just on a sort of predominantly a personal observation, but also I'm sure it reflects the approach from the organisation that I work for. I think a lot of that actually starts within education. So employers have been through education, and the fact that more and more young people, or the generation of people with a learning disability, have been included in mainstream settings. Most people have got a personal connection with somebody with Down syndrome. If they went to a mainstream school in the last 10 or 20 years in their home, that they have some experience of there being pupils alongside them that had a learning disability. When I went to school in the predominantly the 1970s, 1980s, nobody with a learning disability was in my mainstream school. I know that there are now, and I suppose it's changing those attitudes, because employers are our neighbours. They go into coffee shops, they catch the bus into work, and it's that the visibility of people with a learning disability just makes the whole idea of offering employment, I think, much more accessible, I think, to people who might otherwise have seen it as a potential barrier.
Thanks.
Thanks. I guess following on from what Julian is saying there around inclusive education, I think one of the most powerful mediums we have in the country is media and through people's real lives. We've seen a recent example of the post office scandal, which have been rumbling on for such a long time, and a dramatisation of that has really brought that scandal to the forefront and been able to challenge the wrongdoings there. And I think for me, it's about seeing representation of people with a learning disability and autism in our mainstream media. We work with Hijinks, which are a specialist theatre company who train actors who have a learning disability or a neurodivergent, and I think they've got 7 asks over the next 10 years. One of them is for somebody with a learning disability to win an Oscar, which was achieved just this year. And it's about as well not seeing people represented because it's their story or their trauma that we're watching on TV. It's about them being the dinner lady in the school whilst young people are having their lunch. It's about them being in the background as main characters, but also as background artists as well. And seeing people represented in employment, seeing people represented in all of the other walks of life that the non-disabled people are seeing. So I think that's one of the big opportunities that we've certainly got in Wales, because we've got huge amounts of activity within creative industries at the moment, and it's about ensuring that people with a learning disability and autism play main part in that.
Thanks, Elaine. Anyone else? Any questions before? No. Okay.
One of the things that I think that is important related to context is that probably we can we not ever can change the context, but we can provide supports to this context. It means we have participated in the implementation of a project that was centered in how organizations move towards support structures either than stable structures to provide services. It means that if I invest not in building or services or other types of structures in my organization, instead of I invest in support professionals that can provide support in any place, probably we are being more effective for people with disabilities, and probably we could increase the level of participation into the community of this group in a different way than if we design or provide specific or non-specific, but our services promoted by the organization. This is one of the differences that could be one of the keys.
I think there is some specific technique, and it is contextual analysis. Contextual analysis means to examine barriers and facilitators in the community, person, family, persons, organizations, social, cultural, spiritual, and this kind of technique may try to examine the problems and to develop a plan, and that's contextual analysis. In Spain, in the experiences of the last year, going to the community with people with special support needs, we create some organizations create a role that was the community facilitator. It's just to create networks that or create or reinforce networks already existing in the community, but to include much better the person involvement. And it's in fact having good data of that, because it's in different videos and a big plan
Well, this contest parliament is used to always very specific for each person. And then sometimes the organization should be there and should provide facilitators in the need to do that.
Yeah. That's real, and I think that as researchers, we should really set an example and work more with the public involvement, so involving people and everything that we do. And as we've done with the Engage to Change project, and so future research should always have in mind actually we have to involve the people that actually, you know, have need the services, need this, not services, but need this support in the community. And you know, linked to what Zoe you were saying before about the lack of data for Wales. So I think that we really struggle. This is an observation, as we don't know actually how many people, for instance, with disabilities are in employment in Wales. For instance, we know that Engage to Change really help to have more young people in employment, but we should really follow up and see actually if they are still in employment in the long term. And related to what Julian were saying before about people with Down syndrome working part-time, well, for the Engage to Change, there was really a variety of the number of hours worked. For an average of 17 hours a week, but it was really, you know, varies from people that working only 2 and other working full-time jobs. And so again, that's interesting that we only know data for when they go into employment. And we are aware that some of them actually picked up the hours as they were on with their job. So it would be interesting to know how they are actually doing now and having that type of figures. Andrea?
Thanks, Lisa. Only a quick one. This kind of come to mind because you're talking about, as you know, Wales doesn't host data for many people with disabilities in Wales. Also, another one kind of bring up as researchers and as our researchers really, as researchers looking at these statistics in the third sector, how can we work together better to support people with learning disabilities and their experiences?
I think it's really important to focus on lived experience and to ask what somebody wants. But it's all quite individual from what everybody wants, but it's really important to make sure that we are listening to the voice of those that we are there to support. I think it's also really important to kind of read the room and really make sure that we are focusing the training and our efforts on the areas that need to be focused on, not the areas that potentially we think need to be focused on. So it's really making sure that we are very person-centered in our approach, but also very centered on what's important. And for us, kind of, you know, the voice of those with lived experience is really key to everything that we do. You know, we ask advice, we will ask opinions, we will shape what we do, we will go for funding that we know is going to be put to practical use, so it's just funded for the sake of it. You know, a nice little project that will then, you know, will then just disappear. We don't want that. We want something that's got long-term importance and long-term outcomes and positive actions as well.
I mean, I've also made a claim for inclusion just in mainstream research. I mean, clearly, if you've got a research topic that's specifically focused on people with learning disability, things like easy read participant materials, you would assume as a given. But how often does that happen just in generic researchers who would, you know, research, you know, people with a learning disability are members of the wider population. They may have views on public transport, they have views on the environment, they have views on consumer, you know, attitudes. And it's just thinking about how often do the generic research approaches include the voice of people with a learning disability, and it's a big missed opportunity, really.
Yes. Thank you. Any other question? Oh, yeah, we've got a question there. Hi. Is that on? Yes.
I would say having worked in this field for the last 30 years, I think probably everybody here would agree that, you know, a lot of very positive changes have happened in that period, but possibly not getting us to where we want to be. And a lot of changes probably in education are happening, rippling through. And then there's changes going into employment. And now you guys very beautifully sort of outlined the whole thing about actually needing to take that through to older life and what happens beyond work as well. And this quality of life, which I really like, you know, is that we could measure everything through that. But I'd be very interested to hear from each panelist, you know, if change is still slow, you know, how could we accelerate it? If you could do one thing, what would be one thing you would do to accelerate change?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Who wants to go first? So basically, if you have to pick one change that you want to make things better, then what would you pick?
You choose one.
Well, good, yeah.
Brilliant question.
Yeah.
I think, and it goes back to lived experience, it's for me, it's for the policymakers, the politicians, for those that hold the purse strings, actually listen to the people that want the support and want to be progressing through their careers and have careers. So it's listening to those who actually the difference is being made to, or hopefully the difference is being made to.
One thing that constantly frustrates me is the lack of corporate memory in government, any department you want to know, where you see people start making prescriptions about what changes they need to make that were made 30 years ago and didn't work or weren't done properly. And there would be some initiative within government or an ambassador or somebody who was able to point people to previous experience and cumulative experience, so that people aren't just allowed to make things up on the hoof without actually understanding the wealth of evidence that is already there to guide that decision making. I know people think that politics trumps all, but sometimes there actually needs to be some consideration of what works.
I'd probably add in the inclusion of people with a learning disability or neurodivergent in the political life, people that are making decisions. We have quite a well-known individual locally here in South Wales who is a community councillor. It would be wonderful if we had a member of the Senate. I think there was an MP who self-identifies as being neurodivergent. I hope that he's still in post, but what's that, 1 out of 660 odd? I think as we see opportunities opening up to individuals with different abilities, it would be lovely to see that included at that sort of political level, that would be good role models for people, but also could directly bring their life experience into changing policy.
Is that right? Well, I think that we have the framework, the United Nations conventions, the framework. Probably the idea is that we all are equal. I used to start one of my subjects with my students with a theory, and it says people with it is not referred to people with disabilities, it's people different. People in different countries, so people with disabilities dance like me, like us, eat in fast food restaurants like us, have songs and fell in love like us. How long will it take to say, well, at the end he says, they are like us. How long it will take to say, we are like them? The question is, if we are equal, and it is a question of rights, if everyone's the same, this is the idea that we have to follow.
Well, you know that it's a trap. There's not only one thing to change. It will be very easy to choose only something. We have speaking about contextual approaches and the importance of supports. But if you should choose one, is the person is self-esteem, self-determination, and independent life. So it provides personality traits or behaviors that can help or self-help the person to solve the difficulties that he's going to find. You know? I think not only one thing. I will be trying that the person assumes their own responsibility to have decisions he can do or she can do in any moment. I think it's in the four elements when I spoke about quality online, this is the first one. It's the more psychological approach, it's the more personal. People who work with that in Dutch country work with some characteristics of, I don't know very well in English, but strengths and behaviors that could be important for maintaining the will of the person in time.
I think I've got an answer to the question. Inclusive education for me, it always comes back to getting inclusive education right and ensuring that our non-disabled children grow up knowing the barriers that disabled children face and being part of the solution. They will be the employers, they will be the psychologists, they'll be the nurse, they'll be the supported employment job coach to people with a learning disability. So it's always about having a inclusive education or a two-tier system where a group of people go to another building or go to another classroom and we learn from a very young age that people are different. I think that's fundamentally my answer. But there's a question when I think in my career about the time that we were most able to make the best change at speed. It was during the pandemic and third sector organisations, people's voice organisations, local authorities, change makers, politicians came together really quickly, really frequently, without any barriers to change your policy. And I think that perhaps we need to explore how and why that happened so quickly for us to find some answers about changing things at a more rapid pace without bureaucracy attached.
Thanks, everyone. We got a question from answer to my lovely assistant.
What about people with more complex or rare disabilities who often don't have a voice, and how we ensure they are well and included in active aging?
The temptation for people in that group is to think, oh, they must need something different. I think the key is to listen differently. So maybe somebody can't tell you what they want, but you need to be able to listen more creatively, to experiment with decision making in different ways, which we hardly do anything of. What we do is we go to a surrogate voice, go to a family, we go to a carer. And that's that's good because people have best interests at heart. But we need to become more creative in how we offer opportunities to people, and then understand whether they like those or not. And that goes to day in, day out activities as well as retirement activities. I think for me, it's about better communication, better understanding of what people like, what people need, rather than assuming they need something completely different.
Well, 5 years ago in Spain, we had organizations of intellectual and developmental disabilities developed one important project called Mi Casa, like my home, to work with extended support needs people going to the community. In 8 different regions of Spain, already more than 350 persons, an individual approach to train, to facilitate different places, different decisions. We are getting data about what they are the outcomes. You are telling a story about what can we find the difficulties. The main point until now, or one of the main points, is that they improve quality of life when they can have elections, when they have choice. It's the same point as before. But this is opportunities to develop elections and decisions of the person. No, when we provide them these possibilities, they increase activities, increase satisfaction in the way that we are assess that. No? And I think we should learn a lot about how to do. The principles are the same. The principles are the same. The guidelines and the main approaches, contextual approaches are the same, but we must take more time, more money for getting the results equal to the other usual. But we should learn, yeah, how to do it, in what way is working or not.
I remember for women talking about foreign employment. One thing he said in a moment is, if I have to start, I have 5 people to work with them, and I have to start with one of them. To choose, I will choose the one who has more needs. The idea is to start working with those who have more needs. And in my experience, after reading and reflecting on foreign employment, we have to take awareness that we are talking about a group of people that it is so far from other people that are not able to get employment and other things, people with disabilities that are really more demanding because they have much more difficulties than the group of people we are talking about. Well, but anyway, one thing that we know is that in the way that we are more efficient doing what we want to do, it means if we follow more strictly some procedures. For example, if we know how to do personal-centered planning, and we do it for the person with more needs in a more structured way, because they need to make it in a more deep way that with other people, we should do it in the field of employment or supported employment, in the way that we follow strictly evaluate the position, evaluate the meter, evaluate the context, evaluate the meter supports, the people who provide the supports. If we do it, we can solve problems. We can avoid problems related to the context, related to the difficulties to get employment in some places because there are no companies, there are no opportunities. So one of the questions is the rigor of the practices that we do when we have to work with people with more needs. We have to be strongly efficient, doing what we know that we have to do, but in the best way. Okay.
Thank you, Moha. I'm conscious of time because we are running out of time. So I think that I just want to thank our speakers, our panel, for the great contribution today and for this analytic discussion. Thank you everyone for joining online and joining in person. And I wish you all a nice weekend. Thank you.